So survive 7 days in the Arctic has been blowing up on Roblox lately, and the concept is pretty simple. You're stranded in the frozen wilderness, build a shelter, keep your fire burning, fish for food, and you make sure not to freeze. And if you make it to day 7, a helicopter comes and takes you home. But it's actually super hard. Only 4.3% of players have beaten the game, and that made us wonder, what are some real life stories of people surviving in the Arctic or dying while trying?
The first person I want to talk about is Ada Blackjack, and I genuinely believe she has the greatest Arctic survival story in all of human history. Not just because of how long she survived or what she did to stay alive, but because of who she was before any of it happened. Because Ada Blackjack arrived in the Arctic with the same skills as you, a regular Roblox player. In 1921, Ada was a 23-year-old woman living in Nome, Alaska, and her life up to that point had been genuinely hard. She had been raised by church missionaries who taught her to cook, sew, and to read the Bible. They did not teach her any survival skills at all. Her husband had been abusive and eventually abandoned her. 2 of her 3 children had died, and her only surviving son, Bennett, was sick with tuberculosis. She couldn't afford the treatment he needed. He had no choice but to put him in a local orphanage while she looked for work. And before she left, she made him a promise. She was going to come back with enough money to take care of him. And then she found a famous Arctic explorer named Vjalmur Stephenson. He was organizing an expedition to Wrangel Island, an island in the Arctic, and he was looking for some people to join. He was offering $50 a month. For Ada, that was more money than she could ever had access to, and it was enough money to save Bennett. So even though she was terrified and had no idea how to survive in an environment like that, she said yes.
The team was Ada and 4 men, Alan Crawford, Milton Gale, Fred Maurer, and Lorne Knight. The plan was simple. They would spend 1 year in the Arctic, and a supply ship would come the following year with new food and resources. And then they would all go home. But from the moment they arrived, things started to go wrong. The island was way bigger than they had been told, and the supply ship that was supposed to come never showed up. It couldn't break through the ice surrounding the island, and the team was left stranded with only 6 months worth of supplies and no way to communicate with the outside world. In Survive 7 days in the Arctic, when your hunger meter starts dropping and your food supplies run out, this is when players really start panicking.
No.
Because hunger in the Arctic doesn't just make you weak, it makes everything else harder. It even makes the cold worse. And that's exactly what happened to Ada and her team in 1923. And because of the disturbing conditions, 3 of the men made a desperate decision. They were going to walk across the frozen sea ice to Siberia to get help. Andy, what the heck were these guys thinking?
Yeah, bro, going out there in the frozen ocean like that with no supplies, dude, that is a crazy idea, but it just shows how desperate they were.
And guess what happened to them? They were never seen again. That left Ada alone with Lorne Knight. Lorne Knight was dying. He contracted a disease called scurvy. His teeth were loosening and his limbs were becoming useless. Ada became his full-time caretaker. She started fires and she cooked whatever food she could find and brought it to him. But then on June 3rd, 1923, Lorne Knight passed away, and Ada was completely alone in the Arctic with no teammates, no plan, and she had no idea if a rescue was coming to save her.
This is the moment in the game where most players fail, where the resources are gone and the cold is closing in with no obvious path forward. The fire is almost out, the food is gone, and the health meter is low, and no one is there to help us. But Ada did not quit. With no training, she taught herself to shoot. She figured out how to set traps for Arctic foxes and birds, and she learned how to hunt seals as well. She even built an observation tower out of wood she found on the beach so she can scan the horizon for polar bears before stepping outside each day. She maintained her shelter and she kept her fire burning every single day without fail.
And does this sound familiar? This is exactly what you have to do in Survive 7 days in the Arctic. You're supposed to build a shelter, keep your fire going so you don't get cold, and fish for food. Except Ada did it in real life. One wrong move and that was it for her. And unlike Roblox, there's no respawn button for her.
She kept a diary throughout her journey. In one entry dated April 1st, 1923, she wrote, "If anything happens to me and my death is known, please give everything that belongs to me to Bennett for my only son." Aww, Lukey, that's so thoughtful of her. Even in her dying moments, she was thinking about her son. Lukey, I know you would do that for me too, man.
Andy, if I'm in the Arctic and you're waiting for me back at home, I'd low-key rather die.
Bruh, shut up, man. Anyways, on August 20th, 1923, after 2 full years stranded on the Arctic, Ada woke up to a ship breaking through the ice towards the island. She ran down to the beach, absolutely overwhelmed with emotion, and after surviving 2 years alone, with nothing but the skill she taught herself and a promise she made to her son, she had done what only 4.3% of players can do in the game, except she did it in real life. And when she finally got home, the first thing she did was run to Bennett to cure him of his disease.
Wow, Andy, that was a crazy story, and I'm glad Ada was able to get back home and save her son. But this second story is what happens when the Arctic turns on you without any warning at all. In surviving 7 days in the Arctic, you can be hit by a blizzard out of nowhere. This makes it so that you move slower and you get colder even faster. But in November 2017, this happened to a real man named Palusi Kiyuta. He set out from Iqaluit, Canada to go on a hunting trip with his nephew and son. They were making their trip to Pangertung, which they've made multiple times before, but this time it was dangerous. A blizzard came out of nowhere. Within minutes, visibility had dropped to almost zero. Everything turned white and they got completely lost. And suddenly, 2 people in the middle of the Arctic with no shelter, fire, or food were completely stranded, having no idea where they were. And survive 7 days in the Arctic, you basically spawn in with nothing. Your temperature drops so fast that finding cover becomes the only thing that matters. So what do? You start digging into a wall, creating your shelter. Because if you don't save yourself from the cold, you're gonna die from it. And Palusi knew the same thing, but in real life. So he used just a pocket knife to cut the snow into blocks, and he built a snow shelter right there in the middle of the blizzard. This saved him, his son, and his nephew from dying from the cold right away. But still, he had no fire or food, just walls made out of snow around them, and all they could do was wait. They stayed in their shelter for 8 days. 8 full days and nights with nothing between them and death but blocks of snow.
All they had was a small amount of sugar and some tea. Outside, the Canadian military had launched a full-scale search and rescue operation. Search teams were covering massive areas of frozen wilderness. Aircrafts were scanning them from above, and for 4 days they couldn't find them because the shelter that was keeping them alive was also making them impossible to spot. However, after a grueling 4 days, they were both found alive.
But the third story is the one I think about most when I'm playing this game, because one thing I'm worried about over and over again is getting lost from my camp and losing track of where I am. You could go out for wood or catch fish, but then a blizzard could suddenly hit and visibility drops, and then you don't know where you are. This is what Keizo Funatsu experienced in real life in March 1990. Funatsu was a Japanese explorer and part of an international team crossing Antarctica on a major expedition, and these guys were experts who had prepared extensively. But one evening, Funatsu stepped outside his tent to feed the sled dogs, just to take care of them for one quick task. But while he was outside, a whiteout blizzard hit. He couldn't even see his hand in front of his own face because of how much snow there was. He couldn't hear his own voice over the wind, and he couldn't see his tent at all. He had absolutely no idea of knowing which direction to walk to get back. And survive 7 days in the Arctic. If this happens to you, your instinct is to just keep moving and just look for where you are. But if you do this in real life, you won't make it back. Because in a complete whiteout with zero visual reference, your sense of direction fails entirely. You walk in circles without realizing it. And Funatsu knew this. So instead of walking, he stopped. He dug a hole in the snow and climbed inside it, and he curled up in that hole waiting for the storm to pass.
Meanwhile, his teammates knew he was missing. They tied themselves together with a rope nearly 350 feet long and began walking in a large circle around camp, hoping the rope would make contact with him. They walked in a circle over and over again in the whiteout blizzard, and at one point, the rope passed directly over the hole that Funatsu was hiding in. However, the blizzard eventually calmed, and Funatsu heard a distant voice in the dying storm. He climbed out of the hole and he ran towards the voice, and he found his teammates waiting for him. He had survived. Instead of panicking and freaking out in such a dangerous and unpredictable situation, he did the right thing and remained calm. In this game, the players who make it to day 7 are the ones who act like Funatsu. You never go out in bad conditions. You stay put. You protect your temperature and you wait for it to pass.
So next time you guys play Survive 7 Days in the Arctic, remember these people and their stories and how they survived in real life. And then you could be part of the 4.3% of people who beat this game.
So let us know what you guys think in the comments, and until next time.
See ya.